She survived not one, not two, but three disasters aboard the largest ships of her age. She was there when the Olympic collided, there when the Titanic went down, and there when Britannic was swallowed by the Aegean. And every single time, Violet Jessop climbed out alive, and then went right back to work. This is the story of the Unsinkable woman. Let's get into it, shall we? Picture this: a quiet Suffolk cottage, the kettles barely murmuring on the stove. The phone rings, and Violet picks it up. A voice asks, "Are you the woman who once held a baby the night the Titanic sank?" Violet said yes. The voice laughed softly. "I was that baby." And then, click. The phone call ends. Now, was that call real? Maybe. Maybe not. Violet herself told the story later in life, and some historians think that it was just a prank. But whether or not the phone call happened, what did happen is this. Violet Jessop lived one of the most improbable lives at sea in the 20th century. She was an Irish-Argentine stewardess who, by sheer bad luck or cosmic magnetism, was aboard all three of White Star's Olympic-class giants when they met disaster. Olympic, Titanic, Britannic. She survived them all, earning the nickname Miss Unsinkable. So tonight, we're walking her decks. No dirty innuendo intended. Planes to promenade, lifeboat to propeller, Red Cross ward to quiet Suffolk retirement. We'll test the myths, tally the luck, and see what it takes to keep showing up to work when the workplace keeps trying to kill you. So strap on a lifeboat, folks. This is a story of Violet Jessop. Violet Constance Jessop was born in 1887 near Bahia Blanca, Argentina, the daughter of Irish immigrants. Her father raised the sheep, but her mother raised children. 9 of them, in fact, though only 6 survived to adulthood. A statistic that tells you how fragile life was on the plains of South America. Violet's first brush with death came early. Tuberculosis. Doctors told her that she only had months to live. Instead, she beat the odds and lived another 70-plus years. If her life were a novel, that's chapter 1. A girl who wasn't supposed to make it past childhood. Her father died when she was 16. Her family uprooted to England, where Violet's mother found work as a ship's stewardess. When her mother's health failed, Violet, eldest daughter energy at full tilt, stepped up. She applied for stewardess work herself, but hiring managers looked at her and said that she was too young, too pretty, because of course they did. So she dressed down. No makeup, frumpy clothes, the Edwardian version of "I swear I'm just here to work." And it worked. She got her first post in 1908 on Royal Mail Line's Orinoco. Hard work, long hours, seasick patients, and endless linens. But it was a paycheck with a horizon, and it was the beginning of a career that would take her into history. By 1911, Violet was with the White Star Line, working aboard their gleaming new flagship, the RMS Olympic. This was the first of 3 sister ships, Olympic, Titanic, and Britannic, floating cathedrals of Edwardian confidence. On September 20th, 1911, that confidence cracked. Olympic collided with HMS Hawke, a Royal Navy cruiser with a nasty ramming bow. The warship punched into Olympic's starboard side, bending the propeller shaft and flooding 2 compartments. Nobody died, but repairs were costly and time-consuming. Violet was on board that day. Imagine the chaos, passengers shouting, crew scrambling, the sudden knowledge that your ship, the unsinkable marvel, could indeed be gashed open. Now, because of this, Olympic had to limp back to port. Her repairs siphoned men and parts away from her sister under construction, delaying Titanic's maiden voyage until April of 1912. Now, if you're superstitious, that's a bad omen. If you're Violet, it's just another day in uniform. April 10th, 1912. Violet Jessop boards Titanic at Southampton. She's 24 years old, assigned as a stewardess. Her role? To keep passengers calm, comfortable, and properly tended to. She later recalled being asked to stand on deck during the sinking, to act as a calm presence for non-English speakers, which is a wild job description, being a living example of bravery. Now, the ship itself was complete déjà vu. Many of Titanic's officers, Captain Smith, Murdoch, Wilde, had served on Olympic. The layout was nearly identical. The grand staircase, the humming engines, a ship that looked like it could make Poseidon jealous. Then, on April 14th, the iceberg. Impact at 11:40 p.m. The disbelief, the slow tilt from inconvenient to catastrophic. For Violet, it was duty first. She helped with lifeboats, followed orders, and stayed steady. Hospitality in the middle of history's most infamous maritime disaster. And then, someone told her to get in. She climbed into Lifeboat 16. As the boat lowered, Sixth Officer James Moody, who would not survive the night, handed her a baby. Violet cradled it until they reached Carpathia, Titanic's rescue ship. There, she said later that a woman wordlessly grabbed the child and vanished. It's one of the most famous details of her story, but records suggest that the child in Boat 16 was an infant named Asad Tanis, cared for by another passenger, Edwina Trout, and reunited with his mother aboard the Carpathia. Did Violet hold the same baby for a time, or did memories blur in the chaos? We may never know. What we do know is Violet survived. She reached New York with the others saved, and then, like many crew who couldn't afford to quit, she went back to sea within weeks. No therapy, no break, just back on the clock. Because bills don't sink, even if ships do. And if resilience had a face, it was Violet Jessop quietly putting her stewardess cap back on. By 1915, Europe was engulfed in war. Titanic's youngest sister, Britannic, was requisitioned as a hospital ship. Painted white with red crosses, she carried nurses and wounded men through the Mediterranean. Violet signed on as a voluntary aid detachment nurse. Her stewardess skills, making beds, calming nerves, translated to bandages and morphine. On November 21st of 1916, Britannic struck a German mine near the island of Kea. The explosion ripped open her forward hull, and she sank in just 55 minutes. Much, much faster than Titanic. As a result, evacuation turned frantic. Some lifeboats were launched too soon and too close. As the ship listed, her still turning propellers churned the sea like giant blades. 2 boats were sucked straight in and smashed to pieces. Violet's boat was being dragged that way, and so she jumped, slammed her head into the keel of the ship, and blacked out before surfacing. Years later, doctors confirmed that she had cracked her skull that day. Now, in total, 30 people died of the disaster of the Britannic. Hundreds lived, thanks to daylight, warmer water, and a quick rescue. Violet lived again. Miss Unsinkable, now 3 for 3. Now, let's pause and take stock of Violet's improbable survival resume. Childhood tuberculosis she wasn't supposed to outlive? Check. The Olympic collision with a Royal Navy warship? Check. The Titanic's icy plunge? Check. Britannic's mind-torn death spiral and her head cracking against the keel? Check. That's 4 maybe 5 if you count the general hazards of spending decades at sea. Now, some accounts even suggest typhoid in her youth alongside tuberculosis, but imagine a child in Argentina given months to live grows up to face some of the most deadliest maritime disasters of the century. If her life had a theme, it was defy the odds. Now, she wasn't alone, and this is something that we'll get into in the debrief, but another White Star employee, a stoker named Arthur John Priest, also survived the Olympic, Titanic, and Britannic. Now, if you saw either of those names on a passenger list, you might have thought twice about boarding. It's the kind of gallows humor that history seems to just enjoy. So, was Violet lucky, or was there more? She was competent, disciplined, and calm under pressure, the very traits her job demanded day after day. Survival is never pure chance, it's what you do when your chance comes calling. Now, if this were Vegas, she'd probably been escorted out of the casino years ago for breaking the math. Now, after the armistice in 1918 that ended the First World War, Violet didn't hang up her uniform. She went back to sea. First with White Star, then Red Star, then Royal Mail Line again. She even worked world cruises in the interwar years, pouring tea and fluffing pillows for passengers who probably never knew her backstory. In 1923, she married a fellow steward named John James Lewis. I know 3 first names is the entire name, probably a red flag, and probably for the best, because their marriage didn't last long, about a year, and accounts suggest that the union was brief and unhappy, ended with no children, so Violet poured her energy back into work. Now, eventually, she finally retired to a cottage in Great Ashfield, Suffolk, where her garden and her memories kept her company. And it's here that we get that eerie story. A phone call during a storm. Violet picks up and the voice says, "Are you the woman who once held a baby the night the Titanic sank?" Violet replies, "Yes." The voice responds that I was that baby. The phone clicks. Now, some historians chalk it up to a prank. Others think Violet's memory blurred with stories that she had heard. The documented baby from Lifeboat 16 was Isad Tanus, entrusted to another passenger and safely reunited with his mother. But the phone call has the ring of folklore, a ghostly thank you over the decades. Violet dies in 1971 at the age of 83. She didn't live to see her memoirs published in 1997 as Titanic Survivor, but she left a voice behind. One that finally found print long after her last kettle had boiled. I like that timing. It's almost as if the ocean wasn't finished telling her story. Now, to get into the nitty-gritty, especially from her memoirs, we have to go over stewardess. So stewardess sounds genteel. In the reality, it was back-breaking, relentless service. Wake calls at dawn, endless trays of tea, seasick passengers, flowers arranged just so in first-class cabins, and then when war came, the same posture of care, but now with bandages, morphine, and men moaning in pain. This rhythm mattered. When Titanic struck ice, Violet didn't freeze. She followed orders, helped calm passengers, and kept moving. When Britannic blew open in the Aegean, she didn't panic. She leapt. Years of serving without complaint had built in a muscle memory. Stay steady and act quickly. That's the hidden truth for her survival. Not just luck, but training. Even if the training was carry tea upstairs in high seas without spilling. Now, honestly, I can't carry coffee across my kitchen without a near-death experience, but Violet did it on a moving ship in corsets, all while dodging disaster. Her memoirs don't read like a checklist of events. They read like impressions. The grandeur of Titanic's rooms, the eerie calm after a ship dies, the faces of passengers and patients. She was above all a worker, and that work is what kept her alive. So we're going to clear the wake. We're going to hit a couple of myths associated with some of the events that Violet was a part of and survived, and dig a little deeper in preparation for the debrief. So the first up is that the Britannic was torpedoed by a German U-boat. Well, she was not torpedoed. She had hit a magnetic sea mine. It matters not for the blame, but it explains why she went down so fast. War traffic through mined waters. Potholes open to air out the wards. Full speed ahead. All small decisions became fatal. Second up, the baby in Lifeboat 16. Now, Violet swore that she held one, but records suggest Edwina Trout cared for the child, Assad Tanus, as we had mentioned. Now, could Violet have also cradled him for some time? Absolutely. Could memory have blurred in trauma? Of course, but what matters isn't whose arms the baby was in, but it's that the child survived. And lastly, the nickname Miss Unsinkable. Now, it's a catchy name and truly one of the better ones I've heard throughout history. But Violet never strutted around claiming it. She treated these disasters less like Hollywood showdowns and more like really, really bad work days. You get through them, you keep serving, and you move on. Now, if anything, she probably would have rolled her eyes, straightened a pillow, and asked if you wanted tea. Violet Jessop's legacy isn't carved in marble or cast in stone. It is in posture, shoulders squared, steady hands, humor dry as a ship's biscuit. You'll find her in dramatizations, sometimes as a background nurse, sometimes as a composite character. But the real Violet, she was ordinary, and that's exactly what makes her extraordinary. History tends to remember the captains and the millionaires. Violet reminds us that the people making beds and serving tea were the backbone of these stories. And when chaos came, they carried themselves and others through it. Survival, she shows us, is a team sport. She didn't outwit physics, she respected it. She read the situation, moved on when she had to, and relied on her crew. That's not luck alone, that's competence meeting chaos. And then there's that cottage in Suffolk, the kettle singing, and maybe, just maybe, a mysterious phone call on a stormy night. A story that may be myth but feels true because we want it to be true. We want Violet's story to connect across time, as if she were still holding a baby, still steadying a hand. Born in 1887, died in 1971, memoir published in 1997. In between, the Atlantic tried 3 times to keep her, and 3 times she told it, not today. So what do we carry off the ship with Violet Jessop? Well, first, it's that ordinary jobs are often the spine of extraordinary stories. Second, it's that eyewitness memory is priceless, but usually needs to be cross-checked. Oral history is a lighthouse. It illuminates, but it doesn't always point true north. And third, that courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it looks like a woman in uniform, tightening her cap and simply doing the necessary thing. If you want to hear Violet's voice yourself, track down Titanic Survivor, her biography, or read National Geographic's profile, or if you really want to go deep, you can dig into the passenger lists on Encyclopedia Titanica. But if you really want to imagine her, don't picture the lifeboat. Picture her tucking a flower into a vase, checking the clock, and moving on with a half smile. Because that, more than anything, is why she lived. This has been Naked History. I'm Dylan Gassaway, and thank you for listening. If you would love to, share this with one of your friends who you think would survive a couple of sea shipwrecks. And coming up in the debrief, what exactly happened with Britannic spinning propellers and how Violet Jessop came within seconds of becoming history herself. We'll also dive into a couple of people who have had very similar brushes with fate. and a little history of shipwrecks at sea and the significance of what they mean to us today. So once again, I've been Dylan Gasaway, and this has been Naked History. Until next time, remember to stay curious, stay weird, and stay naked. Historically speaking, of course. Have a good one.